Episode 125, Matt Lech. Matt Lech is a podcast producer and media maker. He's best known for Jacobin, Left Reckoning, and The Majority Report. We both dwelled or currently dwell in similar YouTube spaces, and we're both anti-capitalist. A lot of talk about the current state of affairs in this one. Please welcome to the show, Matt Lech. Matt Lech, how are you?
Ron, it is good to be talking with you. I think I'm doing okay. I'm not getting a whole lot of sleep these days, but you know that sort of comes in waves and cycles. So maybe we'll get some sleep in February.
Yeah, right. What a time for the world, and I can't wait to get into it with you. But I always like to start further back than that because I like to get the ground floor for everyone's story. So we're gonna go back to the beginning. Where are you from? What's your origin story? Take it from there.
So I am originally from a place called Mandan, North Dakota. Mandan is sort of 17 or so miles north of where the Dakota Access Pipeline fight was growing up. If people want to locate it related to political events, it's a sister city to Bismarck, right in center North Dakota. I then went to Minnesota State University in Moorhead, Minnesota. Got a communications degree, then came out to New York University where I studied media culture and communication. And after graduating there and sort of bumping around doing odd media jobs, I got a job as a producer of The Majority Report and have been there since for over a decade now, actually. So I've basically had my entire adult career at one place, which I wasn't expecting when I was graduating millennial. I'll say that.
North Dakota is an intriguing place to me because there's all these random things a lot of people don't know about it. First of all, it has one of the, I guess you could say most successful, because it's also one of the only ones, but one of the only public banks in the country that everybody loves because they see what a public bank can do. And then I think I don't know if it's Bismarck or somewhere else, but they also have like one of the best community public broadband experiments in the country, like them in Chattanooga. Like there's all these random things about North Dakota that's actually a great leftist blueprint, and I'm sure most people don't know that.
Yeah, actually that's something me and David Griscom talk about on Left Reckoning, because that's entirely down, I would say, to the nonpartisan league, sort of left radicals after World War I that sort of decided we're going to run on either ballot. We're going to run on Democrat, Republican, but we have our own sort of farmer populist message. And that indeed created that bank. It created the first state grain elevator because they were tired of shipping it to Minneapolis and having those guys basically nickel and dime them. And that state bank, I will say that figures into my biography too. The first media job I ever had was at a place called fullfact.org in London. And that study abroad that helped me get that internship was paid for by the Bank of North Dakota. That was set up by those the socialists 100 years ago today. And I would say that the legacy of that goes down to this broadband sort of stuff. When you see different metrics showing North Dakota is more developed than South Dakota, it's frankly because of the socialists having so much success in North Dakota 100 years ago.
Did you ever read Thomas Frank's The People Know book?
I've read What's the Matter with Kansas and Listen Liberal, but I haven't read that one.
So that one, it does touch upon the North, or at least I'm pretty sure it does. It has been a hot minute, so don't hold me to that. But it's all about the history of populism and how, especially in our modern time, populism has been, I think, co-opted in many ways. But it goes through like what populism actually is in the United States and its roots with farmers and so forth. That kind of goes to what you're talking about. And yeah, it is just incredibly intriguing.
Yeah. And, and it's funny because like I knew the North Dakota story from a pretty early age. That whole period has way more, like for anybody listening to this, look up the radical history of where you're from, because you might be surprised. Like, there's all the sewer socialists in the Midwest. There's a lot of different, I'm less familiar with like the West, for instance, but I do hear people looking into it and seeing like, actually we had people standing up, and it's just a type of history that's not told.
Yeah.
The CNN isn't saying, "Hey, here's what they did to make their lives better." They basically called both parties corrupt and decided to do their own thing. And the other thing, Dakota, just to wrap that up, is a certain reforms were taken by the powers that be that make it harder to do some of those sorts of things. In North Dakota, when I voted the first time, I didn't have to register to vote.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think North Dakota was one of the last states to do that didn't have like that sort of formalized structure. I think it's since changed since I've moved there, but it's a good model. And I think generally like their spirit, the openness of those radicals, like they were working alongside Wobblies in addition to alongside the Democrats and Republicans. I think you see that in certain approaches taken today by Zoran or even like Plattner or El Sayed. That's not to say it won't eventually turn out to be something of a dead end after a little bit of wins are racked up. But I think it's at least there's room to roam in that direction.
No, I mean, I think, yeah, and looking up the radical history, that's just fantastic advice. Like just a side note on that before we get back to your story. I'm an Italian American, and like Italian American identity in the United States has for many years commonly been associated with sort of reactionary conservative politics, and there's historical reasons for that, but there's always been a huge shift the other way, like for years and years and years, going back to the stonemason unions in Vermont to one of the first mayors of New York City. Like, I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And there's finally a couple of organizations near you, actually, in the New York area, that are kind of pushing back against that narrative. And it's so freaking cool to see. And I'm so stoked to see it. And I called my new stand-up show is called Anti-Fascist Pasta Night for that. Well, that's one of the reasons. Like, I'm with you. It's like we really got to retake the radical history of the United States and scream it from the mountaintop, especially now. Well, so getting back to you, though. So what radicalized you?
I've thought the first answer for what got me listening to like the left wing media was the Iraq War. I got a TV in my room right around the time Shock and Awe was happening, and my parents are they like to consider themselves independent, but they can lean Republican, can be a little bit like John Kasich curious or that sort of type of the button down sort of folks. And so I remember and over the 2000 election, I remember it being pretty polarized against Al Gore. And I remember getting into an argument with a kid in 7th grade being like, you're only voting for Al Gore because your parents are Al Gore supporters. And didn't realize like that's sort of why I was vaguely supporting Bush in the 2000 election when I was, a 6th grader. The Shock and Awe thing I tuned in for because I'm like, oh, I have a TV I can tune in with like the rest of the world in addition to like basketball. And I won't say I was horrified, but I felt a very different emotion seeing bombings of a place that I could barely find on a map, different than what I was expecting based on how Republicans were talking about it in the run up to it. And over the course of the next 3 or 4 years, I started listening to a radio station called KFAN, which is a sports talk station in Minneapolis, but it has these old, sort of like older liberal guys that were very quick against the war. And so, especially in high school, I could go out for lunch in my car, and I would just sit in my car eating on a lot of periods and listening to those guys talk about how horrible the Iraq War was going. So that was the first thing. And then the financial crisis hits right when I'm in college. I'm literally a freshman or maybe a sophomore, and I was in a German history class as they're talking about the Lehman Brothers and all that stuff. And we're reading, who was it? Hegel, Nietzsche, and Marx. I think Hegel, Marx, Nietzsche in that order. And I'm reading Karl Marx, and the professor had sort of presented it as if it was an idea, collection of ideas that had been discredited and, weren't applicable. And I'm reading it being like, oh, like especially the Communist Manifesto, I'm thinking, was he just early in a lot of this stuff, in a lot of the way these things are sort of inevitably going to go with, the sort of separation into ownership versus workers and this sort of thing. And from that point, I would say I wouldn't have called myself a Marxist in college, but I wrote editorials in our newspaper that were saying maybe we should be a little bit more open to Marx and not
Mm,
sort of dismiss it. So that sort of, and then probably the thing that fully turned me into a anti-capitalist entirely, because prior to then I was sort of like happy to see Obama win, and I obviously, like, over Republicans, I'm happy to see those guys win. But the problem of frankly, like, seeing how expensive it was to get a college education, and neither my parents went to college. So when NYU says, "Hey, get a master's degree at NYU," like, I'm going. I don't care. I'm signing whatever papers I need to sign it. And then you see, oh, this is debt bondage, and there's not jobs, and it's crazy. Like, I feel so sorry for the kids graduating today, because I literally think it's even worse situation than when I graduated into the workplace, labor marketplace, because it was tough for me to find a job, and I was very close before I got the job at Majority Report, because Matt Binder decided to do journalism over at Mashable. I was about to go teach English in Korea, and I was probably about a couple of weeks from running out of what remained of my NYU student loans, and then I got a job doing left-wing propaganda, and the rest is history.
yeah, I think we're probably around the same age, because for me it was the Iraq War as well. Like, I just, I was kind of just apolitical throughout high school. Like, I didn't really pay a lot of attention. Like, I had a moral compass, but I wasn't really tuned in that much. And then Iraq happened, and I was like, wait a second, I thought they didn't do 9/11. Like, what's going on here? Why are my friends who just signed up for the ROTC to help pay for college going to fight in this war that they told they were never going to be sent to? They're being sent now. What's going on here? Like, and then all of a sudden you learn, oh wait, the US has done some terrible things over the years, and here's this Outfox documentary that tells you how the news is lying to you. And then it was just like off to the races. Here's this thing this guy Noam Chomsky wrote. It was just on.
Yeah, and it's funny, like, the prevalence of documentaries and how important those were. I remember watching The Corporation on a series of DVDs as a big one, and Chomsky, of course, loomed huge in terms of, like, left-wing intellectuals. There was really only like Noam Chomsky was definitely the most prominent, name checked in Good Will Hunting alongside Howard Zinn. Probably cemented those two guys. Like Chris Hitchens, I liked Chris Hitchens growing up, but he was an Iraq War supporter, and that was like one of the first sort of battles with my idols that I had to do as a young man. But it was really Chomsky is kind of the only guy, which is, I love a lot of Noam's work. It's a shame to see him in some of these Epstein stuff, looking for tax advice and that sort of stuff, especially because, not to say anything too definitive about it. It seemed like they didn't respect him a whole lot and kind of made fun of him behind his back, but used him as like a way to market dinner parties. But that's a whole nother thing. A little bit on my mind.
No, I feel you. I haven't really taken like the deep dive into that specific. I've seen some of the things and I'm like, oh no, really? And it's just blanket statement. We're never going to hear his side of it.
Yeah.
Like, we're never, like, he's basically just bedridden, and that's likely not good. So we're never going to hear what he has to say about it or his defense. I don't know. It's very unfortunate, but
it's a shame because, I've produced interviews with Noam. I would still recommend Noam Chomsky works 100%. Sure. It's just, you're going to have to be ready to say, or ready to have somebody slide the Bannon Noam Chomsky pick in your replies when you do it, and just maybe take that on the chin if you're going to read his work with Ilan Pape.
Yeah, right. So I always ask this question to everybody who I interview that's just part of the lefty YouTube space or whatever you want to call it, or adjacent. Do you think that the space as a whole has been a positive force for progressive change in the U.S.?
I have always had a pretty pessimistic view of this. And I'd go back to a Hunter S. Thompson story where he was running for sheriff in Colorado. And he lost. He ended up losing. And one of the things he blamed on losing was how much he yapped about it in the press. And and then there's the Gil Scott Heron thing of the revolution will not be televised. I think we have a very important role to play when it comes to things like this fascist advance where they're blaming Somalis for everything, right? Like the counter propaganda is extremely important because propaganda is extremely dangerous. It's ruined lives of millions of people, and let alone killing a lot of people. I think there's a limit though, and I think people on the left need to push people, and I think push them in whatever direction is in force of action. That's not just consuming more media. Like I see certain, even Marxist-Leninist type YouTube commentators say, we need to study more. And I think there is an importance to that. Political education is extremely important. But also action is, and trying things out and working things. And I think there's an inherent incentive to say, what we need to do is all study more, aka sign up to patreon.com/leftreckoning. And I think it has had good effects. Like I think there are candidates that are speaking with a certain register that I don't think would have developed the way it has if it wasn't for like the last 15 years, even going back to like liberal left-wing blogs, like the understanding of what's going on. I think abundance is sort of a reaction to this. Is like, okay, they actually do have something of a point when it comes to people there's an issue with wages not rising. There's an issue with things not being affordable. We do need to speak to that. And I think that's had a good effect. But as a whole, I think it can, I think it's something that everyone in this space needs to be really guarded about. Like, can this be the ultimate good, or what role can you play? I think a lot about this Majority Report. Like we have a lot of politicians, especially post Trump's second victory, that want to get onto the show. It's crazy because they see like, oh, he got on Trump got on Joe Rogan, he got on all these other things, and it's a tough thing because politicians usually like to come on with an emergency sort of thing. It's not to sort of chit chat about overall philosophy or history. It's like, we have this emergency. Trump is doing this. Let's talk about this. And there's certain politicians where I'm willing to do that for. And there's certain ones that aren't. And, we just had Ro Khanna on, for instance. There's a lot of things I'm suspicious about with Ro Khanna, with the David Sachs stuff, the general venture capital thing. But I will say, like, the Epstein stuff wins points with me. He's generally good on anti-war. He's got to stop taking photographs with Zionists like Randy Fine. He needs to figure out who those people are for a start. Because if I know who Randy Fine is, Ro Khanna should know who he is. But it's sort of a give and take. But it's a question I think about honestly a lot, and I do think about it in the context of like Gil Scott Heron's revolution will not be televised. Like I think it really is important for folks on left-wing media to know their place and not like I have a certain inclination towards say a DSA approach, but honestly, like when I see people say or like I am in saying I'm not watching as much of your stuff as I used to, and to me it's like, well, did the move go to a different type of media, or did it go to your now part of a group, whether it's a tenants union, whether it's a socialist group, whether it's a pro-immigration? If it's something like that, by all means, like, you don't need to, it sounds like you have it. It sounds like you have it figured out and you're actually doing the work. So, I will say, like, I think that has happened. I think you see the big numbers in lots of these groups, a lot of these protests, like back to the George Floyd protest, even to the current ones. And I think it is a lot of people who are getting their news from like an independent left type of media. And I think if I would close on an optimistic note, I would emphasize that.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I mean, My short answer to that question is no. And it's because I'm speaking the collective we here, like everybody. And I think that there is this huge lift to be had because we live in a country that just has this just obnoxiously corporate controlled media that, I mean, our structure would be illegal in a lot of other countries, as it should be. And we have seen, especially as of recent, just the blatant willingness to straight up freaking lie. And it's up to, I think, the independent sphere to be like the true antidote to that. And I think it's just, I think as a whole, it's just sort of fallen pretty short. And, again, there's no like one finger to point or anything like that. It's kind of a collective thing. And when I say this, I'm not dismissing diamonds in the rough, but I think as a whole, it's fallen short, and peaks under the hood I've had have amplified said discouragement.
Yeah, I think it's similar to startups. All these tech guys talk about how we're in a golden age of startups, like post like internet and stuff like that. And if there's actually numbers on how many new businesses start up each year, and we've actually been cratering since the 70s. So and there's a certain thing where you look at the overall media. Okay, we have this new independent media which is able to zero in on topics that were never sort of really given due diligence or due resources in the past, or very rarely, like the CIA drug trafficking story. Like that was a local newspaper. And the thing is those local newspapers don't exist anymore.
Right.
So as this independent media has grown that can, maybe speak more directly to things, the actual sort of whole structure has collapsed. Like in journalism, employment has fallen through a roof. Meanwhile, PR and spin has eclipsed it. So we have more people paid to be liars on behalf of somebody paying them to lie than you have people find out the truth because, the Kansas City Star can afford to hire journalists because the local people want to advertise in the Kansas City Star. And that has 100% collapsed. And it's scary because that was an accident. The advertising model worked with news for so long for the 20th century. That's not coming back. There's no hope that comes back. And I think that's where you have to think of radical things like universal basic income or things like that. The solution for journalism is the same as it is for mining. Like if certain things are important, you need to make it possible for people to pursue it without going broke. And I think journalism is in such a place where you have all these guys like the Axios guy saying, Barry Weiss is just trying to change things up in a tough industry. It's like, it's a tough industry. She's not trying to do anything other than lie for the billionaire that put her there. And the press can't even talk about this sort of ownership and how gross it is because they're all trying to angle for a job from it.
Well, we used to have a subsidized media in this country. Like it existed. We had it.
Yep.
And obviously with technology being where it is now, where that subsidized media can't be like, hey, no postage for your newspaper, you're good. Obviously, we're in a different technological age, but we can still have a similar subsidized media structure. And I would argue when we had that, we probably had one of the best news experiments in the world. I mean, it's like an average city had 10, 12 newspapers. It's pretty freaking good. And then we just went the complete opposite direction. So I think really it just comes down to, and there's a really good book by a guy named Dr. Robert McChesney who passed away a couple years ago, about a year ago, sadly. But, he talks about just we've lost this idea of journalism as a public good. And in a place like the United States, especially, you need that.
Yeah. And there's no I watched Zodiac with Jake Gyllenhaal, and you look at the newsroom there, and it's I can't imagine there's 4 places in the entire country that has newsrooms like that now. and no places have foreign bureaus. You used to be
Yeah.
able to be like a foreign journalist for newspapers, and that's just dried up because and then you see how obscene it is that in a time like this they'd be paying anchors like the millions and millions of dollars, like Matt Lauer. Like, what kind of return on investment is that getting for folks? It's really a long term decline that we're really facing I guess the full horror of at this point. Because even back to the Iraq War, there was the Knight Ridder news chain that went against the sort of WMD stuff. But already that meant that the rest of the market was so consolidated with people not willing to stand up for like, hey, maybe we shouldn't invade a country across the world, that it happened. And I think we're in a worse situation now than we were in the mid 2000s, which is horrible.
Yeah, because they can make fake videos. Now,
Yeah.
now they can make a fake video saying, putting a gun in somebody's hand that wasn't there, and people don't know the difference. And it's it's
Or you can say the Ronald Reagan video where he says he doesn't like tariffs is AI, even though it's in like newspaper archives.
It's wild. Well, are you excited for Mamdani being in New York?
I mean, yes, is the short answer. I'm, a little bit trepidatious of what they're going to throw at him.
Sure.
But overall, I think it's a really good shot. I think Zoran is very. I think. Let me back up. The DSA thing is exceptional. Like the way that DSA was able to be on every corner over last summer is extremely undertold in the story of why it's so good, because Zoran is a very charismatic, camera ready type of guy. But I've never seen anything like it since I've lived here, that you would have people canvassing. I would see regularly, like on my walk to the grocery store, people in t-shirts canvassing. And that is the sort of thing where if you look at Jeremy Corbyn and him getting the sort of like unlikely ascension to labor leader, Catalyst magazine, the most recent edition, has a sort of look back at the Corbyn failure. And the big issue I think they have pointed out is it sort of started fighting the internal battles, and then lost it because there was a few things, including criticism that Corbyn was anti-Semitic, but they weren't really building a base outside and pushing people in the community to show that this is we're in power now. And that inability made it like basically weakened Corbyn's handle on power. I think it's going to be interesting to see if this tax fight, that's the main thing, is can Mamdani and the DSA get Hochul to move on this tax stuff. And it's tough because this goddamn ICE stuff is going on. So you have to have DSA members saying, hey, Kathy Hochul, thank you for, pledging this and that about ICE. When, it'd be nice to be going on the march against her and all the allies she has trying to fight against the tax increase, which is just so obviously what we need to do. Like this, we don't have problems in New York that other places do where stuff can't be built. There's the skyline is completely unrecognizable. And the only problem is only rich people can like do anything with those buildings. So I think it's going to be a very educational, at least 4 years. But I think there's a chance, given how I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, like certain wage theft things that Zoran's already got for delivery drivers. These are sort of low-hanging fruit because of how bad Eric Adams' administration was. I think there's a chance for victories while you're trying to move folks on the broader project. And I think Hochul is not as formidable of an adversary as, say, a Cuomo would be. I think she got there out of like crazy circumstances because Cuomo was disgraced. She always says things like, if you push me on something, I'm less likely to do it. But the truth is she was against congestion pricing, which has been a massive success. Like I've never seen anything like the decision to start charging people to come lower than like the 70th Street in Manhattan. people that drive like it, people that don't drive like it. And that, I think that's where my hope is, that there are common sense things that can be done with an executive position that can build a momentum, as opposed to, say, just you get in there and you're barely able to do anything, and now we start from zero again.
So shifting gears nationally, this is something I've heard you talk about some on your show. So I kind of want your general take on it. The Maha movement and RFK in particular. What is your response to all that? And why do you think some on the left, or at least say they're on the left, have fallen for it?
I think there's a really good reason, and I think it's because of our entire health and food system. I know people who were hoping that RFK was going to have a big impact on certain additives in things that are banned in the EU and that people are allergic to here. I can't remember the one example of it, but it's something I know very close. Like, they can't drink a certain thing if they it's carrageenan, and if they have that, immediately they're sick. And that's the type of thing where, and there's endless examples of that. Like, our food it's more expensive, it's less nutritious, and less safe than the rest of the world's. And it really isn't, I don't think, a failure of individuals, the Maha thing. I think it's a big shame that and it's a sign of how shabby, frankly, this country is, that we haven't, and the vaccine thing entirely. I think Abdul El Sayed up in Michigan is talking about this perfectly. And like, selfishly, like, we've had him on Left Reckoning. I don't know if he's a whole doctor, so I'm not going to say that we influence his approach on this. But the thing he's saying is that, look, before COVID, people are afraid of the doctor because it's a giant financial expense. And now all of a sudden you're telling people, no, for your health, you can go for free and get this thing done. That, by the way, you're going to have to take a few days feeling ill on. So, like, if you need your health, you're just going to have to swallow that. Sorry if you're a caregiver or whatever. We don't have any extra support for that. I think it was a recipe to engender distrust in people. And really, ultimately, what, like, I'm multiple boosted. I like the vaccines, but the vaccine push was not because it was trying to make people healthy, because, as we all know, it didn't 100% protect from further infection and bad effects. It was really a way to lower the disease vector so people could get back to work, making money for capitalists.
It was all about capitalism. I mean,
exactly.
That's the thing people forget when they have leaned into distrust of public health itself. It's like, no. The enemy was capitalism. The enemy is capitalism.
It's in a public health mask.
Yeah, right. And it's like, and we've been duped to fall for these other things. And we've been, and yeah, I think that, to piggyback on your point, there is a huge point to be made about our food culture in this country. I mean, and you named a bunch of examples. I can name a bunch too. Hell, I can name a couple examples by myself. I can't have a glass of red wine in the United States, but when I'm in Italy, I can drink it all day, all night. And, well, maybe not all day and all night, but I could have a glass or two and be totally fine. That's not the case here. And there's tons of other examples too. There is a huge issue with our food culture, and it bothers me so much that very important issue has been hijacked by, I think, a eugenicist and pseudoscience pushing charlatan. And it's just such a damn shame. And it's such a damn shame that people couldn't see that this was all about capitalism. The 10 days to 5 days was all about capitalism. Even though these vaccines don't prevent transmission, just get it and you'll be fine. And we're going to have like this, put that as the holy grail approach. That was all about capitalism, and people are now, and we also have, I think, a public failure of how a lot of people just don't even know the anatomy of how a virus works. And so because of that, like they clung on to all these bizarre pseudoscience explanations without any scrutiny.
Yeah. It's something where, and a lot of, I don't want to get too deep into it, but it's a shame. And I know people very close to me who lost people after the vaccine. And the truth is, like, there should be way more help for people outside of the context of we need to do immunization. Like
Sure.
and Nancy Pelosi deserves, I think, maybe the majority of blame for that, because she said instead of pushing for what the sane members of my caucus that I try to beat down every chance, and we're going to do a thing called Cobra, which is just like Uber subsidies for private health insurance, but isn't actually that affordable for you, the user. And because they wanted to avoid doing the right thing. And I mean, that it is a moment of supreme darkness. It's just a shame that people don't understand the nature of what was done to them. It wasn't to try to like microchip you or kill you. In fact, it was just to try to get you back out because your labor was needed to get the stock market roaring again.
Right. Well, what do you think is kind of the fix for all this? Like, how do we kind of get out of that muck? Because I would say, I'm hoping you have a slightly more optimistic take than me. Because my take is public health is just, it will take generations.
Yeah, I mean, the rise in measles cases year over year over the past 4 years, like, there's something to be said about having done it at a frankly less technologically advanced time, because people were just sick of it. And they're obviously, like, you can go back 100 years and see anti-vax propaganda. In fact, Benjamin Franklin, one of the first things he ever published was anti-smallpox vaccine stuff that he later had to he had to retract it later in life.
What was his claim? I've never heard about this. What was his claim?
This was when he was like helping his, I think, older brother or whoever in his family had a printing press. That it was a big thing at the time, the controversy. Should we do this? And the way that you were vaccinated for smallpox at the time was like actually, I think, drawing, like cutting yourself and infecting yourself. So it's crazy. But the whole thing was, it was more danger than it was helping anything. And later in his life, he, I believe, lost a child to smallpox and recanted ever being anti-vax in print. So this stuff goes back a long time, but I think it is, I don't know if it'll, the thing is like, if it takes a couple of generations, it might just take one, but that means it got really bad because we started seeing, whole classes of children get these diseases that we thought were wiped out, when FDR was a president. So, but I agree about the pessimism of the public health thing. RFK, David Griscom and I do a bum steer of the year thing over on Left Reckoning, and RFK, we had him up against Nick Fuentes and I believe Vivek Ramaswamy. RFK ran away with it because of this public health thing. And it's not even just like the vaccine stuff. It's we're slashing these jobs in college towns across the country to like do investigation stuff. Like this is not actually what I believe. But very early in Trump's second administration, people were saying if he was a plant from China to just destroy our competitiveness on the world stage, how would he be acting any differently? And when it comes to stuff like that, like I wonder, like, frankly, the vaccine was, and I think there's much to look at to China in terms of their productive capacity and state and how they build all those damn trains. We got the vaccine.
They build a hospital in 48 hours.
Exactly. Like that stuff is the stuff we need to do. There is something to be said that I guess maybe humbles me a little bit, where the state public-private approach that the U.S. took in the vaccines did create better vaccines. And we're just going to destroy that. Like we're going to stop having all these students from around the world come to, and it's not just like the Ivy Leagues, like Minnesota State University, where I'm come from. A lot of the people in those schools were foreign students, and I think that's fine. Like I actually think that probably helps them in terms of like raw nationalism. That's probably good for America, and we're just saying no because of some fantasy that if we kick out and get a certain percentage demographic back up to white, or for white folks, then everyone's life is going to be better because of their jobs. Like it just seems crazy to me.
Well, it's like people want 100% and 0%. And that's just not how the world works, whatever topic you want to take. And, like if you want to just look at the COVID vaccines, well, do they 100% prevent transmission? No. And they never said they did. If you read the sheet of paper that was handed to you, it did say that. And so, no, they're not 100% of transmission. You still need to do other preventative things. Oh, well, then it's all complete bullshit. Well, no, it doesn't mean that either. I mean, it helps prevent against severe infection, and it is a layer of protection, just like everything else. Oh, are masks like 110%? Well, no. I mean, dude, I mask in crowded indoor spaces still. If somebody said, hey, this elevator has a bunch of coughing people unmasked with COVID, do you want to get in this elevator? You can wear your mask. I'm still going to take the stairs, mask or not, but it certainly helps. I mean, it's just one of those things. People want 100% and 0%, and that's not how life works.
Yeah, and the mask thing is such a shame because, well, first of all, it's like, why do you think doctors wear it? You think they're doing it but yeah, right. Also, like, Asian countries reacted to the bird flu in such like a more advanced way. Frankly, like, we're going to start wearing these things when we're sick, when we're on planes, and it's just sensible to do that. And yeah, like, and part of it is like, it is again this distrust because people are scared. Like, ultimately, that if it's not 100%, then why are you telling me to do it? Thing is based on a type of fear. And it's just it's hard, and that I think the only difference that I could see is just societal distrust. Is America just doesn't have the trust built, and look, like, recent events aren't likely to cultivate that trust. And sure. I don't know what the solution is because, previously, I guess religion, like I guess it's been bad before in this country. We were really like the 19 teens and the 20s, like, if you were an anti-war activist, you were literally getting tarred and feathered still, and thrown in jail. But yeah, like the environment it seems less rational. And I never wanted to be a type of person that, it's Idiocracy is a documentary type of thing. It does seem like we're not able to follow the thread on certain things public health anymore.
Well, is there a way to try to slow down this fascist coup that's happening? No pressure.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's to get on the optimistic side of things, which I don't necessarily believe, but I could entertain an argument for. What they're trying to do is also impossible. Like, they're not going to be able to whiten the country to the extent that they want to. It's not going to bring back manufacturing jobs. In fact, manufacturing investment is collapsing again under this. And not that I think Biden's efforts were good enough. They were something. They moved the needle, and so it will fail. And it's failing in a way that is so brazen that it might be almost educational to people. But so I think, like, this overt fascism, I think it will fail. Like, they got a lot of money. But, like, how many times can you do this? Like, one of the lies they're having to rely on with Minnesota is that, why is Minnesota the only city that's having problems with it? Greg Bovino was told by a judge in Chicago that he had to show up at 4:00 every day and give her a book report on what he's been doing. Like, they're having trouble everywhere. There's a lot of money toward it. It can float for a while, but it is like a military occupation. And eventually it's going to run out of cash. Now, maybe they steal the elections in the midterms and that sort of thing. I think that possibility can't be entirely dismissed when you have this sort of paramilitary operation going around. I ultimately, if I had to bet, put it on Polymarket, I wouldn't. I think there will be elections. I think they might be fucked with, just like the 2020 election was fucked with, just like the 2000 election, frankly.
I mean, every election is
exactly. But will it be, like, completely impervious to any sort of democratic impulse in the small d by people expressing their will to vote? I tend to think it will be. My problem is just, like, what do we do after that? Does the center just sort of reconstitute itself and actually say, hey, executive power is bad to use. So actually, if we would cancel student loan debt, that would be the same as Trump doing, X or Y when he was in office. And then that just leads us back into the conditions for another sort of building up of this anger. And I will be in a sort of cycle of it. I don't think fascism is built to sort of sustain in the long term. I knock on wood. Like, that's the sort of thing I don't like saying, because it's like sometimes you say things into a mic and you're like, well, I wonder how this is going to age in 5 years. There's so much anger towards this. Like, I'm seeing so many people who don't comment on my political stuff from growing up are posting videos going into the Minneapolis to like protest, like in 10-degree, almost like pushing 0-degree weather. And the same thing happened with George Floyd. Like, American people will mobilize, and I think that's actually probably the best sign. And it hasn't translated well into politics, but people were, even for the World Trade protests, but Occupy Wall Street and the George Floyd, like, and this ICE stuff, people will get out there. And I think at certain point, like the existing order, like, why was the New Deal allowed to be successful here? Part is because capitalists decided somehow in their like longer term interests than the most immediate interests. I think it's because ultimately the sort of capitalist speculator venture capitalists were going to they turn the economy into a gambling thing, like it happened in the Roaring '20s that led to the Great Depression. It just can't last. The AI will never create this sort of wide abundance. It's going to be, change people's interaction with the digital world. It's going to have effects on how research is done, or this or that, whatever. Ultimately, so did the internet. And guess what? You have to work as long as you did before the internet to retire. So, like, what effect really did these sorts of things have? But I don't know. I feel like I'm trying to give an optimistic answer, because ultimately, Ron, I think I kind of think we're behind a pretty severe 8-ball right now.
Sure. Well, where do you kind of find your hope, if you have any?
I think there's a debate that's going on the left, and I'll mention Catalyst Magazine again, which I just read last night, if people can't tell. That goes into this debate on the left that says, actually, there's not a whole lot of room to do policy for working people under capitalism, because as soon as you do, the investors start getting spooked. You start losing these sort of overall economic, these headwinds. You run into trouble with, and there is, I think, an issue here, but that's not just an issue with the left, right? Like, but they ultimately determined that actually you can do more. We've probably been overstating to the fact that we can't do universal health care before the economy collapses. And in fact, if you do some of this stuff intelligently, you're actually creating conditions of economic growth, which I think, is hard to imagine in the American context now. But look at China. We make fun of China for not having a developed stock market. Well, guess what? Their companies, instead of creating good dividends for stock investors, they're actually just building shit. They're actually like reproducing this stuff. Even if it's AI, like a Chinese hedge fund came up with the DeepSeek AI that had sort of everyone in a tizzy a year ago. And that's a model of, it's still like, there's still markets, but it is directed and it's directed for, and I think for a communist would want it to be directed to workers of the world. That's not what China's doing. It's directing it for the sort of glory of China. But that's at least a better model than this. What does this mean for investors? Because that's all the AI thing is now, is who's going to get the monopoly AI that's able to put everyone else out of work, and who's going to be invested in that so they can just reap the dividends for that. And that is a gross way. And that's the way we've been looking at our economy since like Google, right? And everyone's like, oh, I could have invested in Google at this point. What does it say about our economy that that's the ticket? That not the people who work at Google that make this stuff, but the people who gave Google money at the right time get to all of a sudden become millionaires and billionaires. That's ludicrous. That's the wrong way around. You need to have, and I think hopefully, and the best America's been has been like when it's realized it's getting its lunch eaten. So the Sputnik gets launched in the 50s, and all of a sudden, like, oh crap, we have to pay for kids to go to college. And it can't just be the rich kids. We're going to have to support that stuff. We need a kick in the ass when it comes to that stuff. And I think one element that I'm going to be trying to emphasize is how we're getting our ass kicked, and it's not acceptable. That people like San Francisco venture capitalists are put in charge of all this stuff, and we have to bail their banks out. Meanwhile, like you said, China knows how to build hospitals in 4 days. We're closing down hospitals in rural America because we don't want to fund them. Like I think that will eventually get through to American people. I think it's sort of our job to try to do that. And so that's where I'd place my hope is once we realize we're in a competition, then maybe things, because this country is still enviable in terms of resources, in terms of educated population. Like it's just not utilized correctly by the sort of capitalist parasites that are in charge of it.
Well, Matt, plug away. Where can people go to find out more about you?
So the new thing I'm plugging, David Griscom and I have been handed the keys to the Jacobin show. So that is 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern time on the Jacobin Meg YouTube channel. There's also going to be, if not already, a audio link to that for folks who like to watch that. I'm also on Majority Report 5 days a week and Left Reckoning on Tuesdays. So that is pretty much all the places. If you probably be sick of me by the time you get through all those, but have it a la carte.
Matt, thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you, Ron. It's good to talk to you, man.
That was Matt Lech. Check out all of his stuff. If you are on YouTube, chances are he's live there. That's a lot of shows. I don't know how you have that much time. By the way, I apologies in advance if you can tell my voice is a little hoarse. I dealing with a little bit of sinuses, nothing major, but yeah, you might be able to hear it. Music for the 1000 podcast is provided by Andrew Saxonova. Be sure to check out his podcast, the Baywatch Podcast, wherever you get your podcast. Please do leave us a 5-star review, and if you want to support this show on the sustainability end, patreon.com/Ron Placone. For Give What You Can level, we got a really cool community going. You get the 1000 episodes before they're dropped to the public, insider info on upcoming film and events. I have a patrons only show. I'm premiering my new stand-up hour, Anti-Fascist Pasta Night, February 21st for patrons only. So you can become a patron. $1 a month is all it takes. It's a total Give What You Can Patreon. So again, patreon.com/Ron Placone. And we do a Zoom hangout once a month in addition to different shows. So yeah, there you go. 125. We're another kind of round number. We're at another quarter century here. 125. Matt Lech. All right. Catch you next week. Peace. Hey guys, Ron Placone here. Take your own 1,000 challenge. No, you don't need to interview 1,000 people, although if you want to do that, go for it. Your 1,000 challenge can be whatever you want. Maybe you want to call a friend out of the blue once a week. Maybe you want to read a book every month. Maybe you want to start a different garden every season. I guess that might be dependent on where you live. Look, the point of the challenge is taking on an endeavor that enriches your life in some way, and it can be measured. And then, of course, you do it regularly. That's what 1,000 is doing for me, and hopefully for you too. The main reason for this podcast and every podcast I've ever done is to build community. So take your own challenge. Then join our Facebook group. It's called 1000 What's Your Challenge? ? That's 1000 What's Your Challenge ? And post about what your 1000 challenge is and the progress you're making. All I ask is that people be encouraging of each other's challenges. This is personal and vulnerable, so be cool. There's enough negativity on social media. We don't need to add to it. For those of you who aren't on Facebook, hopefully in the future we'll be expanding to places like Discord, Reddit, but for now, we're starting on Facebook. And again, that Facebook group is called 1000 What's Your Challenge? See you there.